Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast, and joining me today to ask me questions about a bunch of stuff I did, I'm not going to say too much, but a surprising amount, but probably not enough in the eyes of most people, investigation on is Pook from Changeling the Podcast. Pook, how you doing?
I, like a bundle of rosemary, am superb. I've been sitting on that for like weeks, just waiting for a chance to deploy it. But
friend of the show, Chaz, had a bunch of parakeets. I can't remember, cockatoos, the little ones.
Budgies.
Something like that. They had a rosemary plant that they were growing in their house. The birds would periodically fly off and bite off bits of it. I'm like, those birds must be delicious.
I wonder
One
if it's,
chicken wing.
Do you think it's like one of those things that randomly produces some kind of dizzying high, but only in birds?
Maybe.
Like catnip for birdnip.
Birdnip. Sometimes animal models just kind of fail. And what we're doing today is, this is an episode I've threatened to do for, at this point, literally years. When I got to do the write-up of the Celestial Chorus for Lore of the Traditions, there was a developer note that one option for the Celestial Chorus, which the Celestial Chorus was my punishment for handing in the Virtual Adepts on time, where I'm like, well, I have all this studying to do. I'm going to get this done. We had like 8 weeks to write it. I handed mine in at 6 weeks. Travis is like, do you want to do Celestial Chorus? And I'm like, I had finished the Virtual Depths. I'm like, that nearly killed me. I don't have enough time to study. Everything is terrible in my life. I'm never doing this again. Travis is like, Celestial Chorus? I'm like, yes, you idiot.
Dare I ask, did you hand that one in before?
No,
okay,
that one did require a little bit of an extension because I was actively in opera season and studying. But the thing I liked about Travis was Travis would list a due date and it's like, oh, it's due Monday. What that meant was, before I check my email on Tuesday, that needs to be in. And there was frequently a 45-minute delay between me hitting submit and Travis being like, got it. So I'm like, got it. So one of the developer strains was, hey, Gnosticism is brought up in Mage 20th. And I'm like, I hate writing history. So my first thought is, I'll breeze through the 4 hours of the Celestial Chorus, write up Gnosticism. That was a terrible game plan because the Celestial Chorus is like 1,500 words, doesn't give you a lot of space.
No?
Yeah, I ultimately dropped that strain, but Gnosticism is ripe for Mage, so I figure I would do what I'm going to call a book report. I'm not an expert in the topic. I know Mage. I did some investigation. I did my cursory read 3 books. Links will be in the show notes. I did the great courses on Gnosticism, thanks the Learning Company. Blew an Audible credit on that. And the internet has strong feelings about Gnosticism, and I largely blame Philip K. Dick. So Pook is going to provide commentary and ask the questions, and I'm going to attempt to provide listeners with something useful.
So, Terry, why don't you tell us about the real-world inspiration for this? Are we calling this a paradigm deep dive, or is it just a philosophical?
I'm probably going to call it paradigm deep dive or paradigm book report. We'll see what our producer thinks is better.
Today, class, I read the Nag Hammadi Gospels.
Yes. We're going to read the Gospel of Truth by Pseudo Jonathan.
Just as an aside, I love the names that come out of this tradition, like Pseudo Jonathan.
It makes sense.
Absolutely, but it's just, I want more people to be named Pseudo Jonathan.
Pseudo Dennis is probably the best known of them. But what is the term where you attribute a text to someone better known than you? It has a real fancy word.
Oh, like something that ends in nim or graph?
Pseudoepigrapha.
Pseudoepigraphica. Okay, yeah.
Pseudoepigraphica.
Yeah.
Pseudepigraph. Sandiegan. So the real world inspiration for this is Gnosticism. You could say one strain is going to be historical Gnosticism. Another strain is going to be what the world of darkness says about Gnosticism. And I could argue a third strain is going to be Philip K. Dick. The actual history of Gnosticism is somewhat hard to make out. And the actual term itself is messy to the point where scholars don't have a generally agreed on definition. It's one of those things where frequently you get a definition so specific that nothing qualifies, or a definition so broad that you're like, Walmart, Gnostic. That's so broad that it doesn't mean anything. Like a 1966 Conference on Gnosticism defined it as Gnosticism, a set of beliefs that had the core idea that there was a divine spark in human beings that comes from a spirit world that we must be made aware of, and that there are some aspects of the divine that have moved into the world to recover that lost energy. Another definition I have that I'll probably be more or less running with is somewhere between the two, is you have a detailed creation myth with multiple steps, entities, and causes. It's more than in the beginning the world began, or the world was formed from the eerie waters of creation, or something like that. An idea of gnosis, which is the desire and the ability to directly in some way know God intimately. This is kind of a level of knowledge and understanding beyond just, say, factual knowledge, to say, I have experienced God, a real kind of ecstatic notion of
That
it.
was exactly the word I was going to ask about, actually. So,
And the third thing is dualism. Now, there are two problems that we run into with dualism. That the idea that there are two things in the world and they act differently. Some things are then ruled out because, well, everything is God. Like you have this pandeist view, or the idea that the divine self-originate created everything. There really is no other. It is merely the presence or absence. I'm going to include both. Like, if you talk about there being two and it meets the other criteria, we're gonna call it Gnostic.
in those contexts, specifically talking about gnosis and dualism, I mean, I could see the ecstatic traditions factoring into the first one, and then with the second one, different kind of levels of, I don't know, moral or absolute good and evil tradition, whatever you want to call them. So would Gnosticism, either by the 1966 heavy quotes official definition or by the working one you're using here, how wide is the umbrella to incorporate a range of attitudes towards that dual nature?
When we're talking about dual nature, it is kind of two formative aspects of reality. It's not merely that every coin has two sides. It's not merely that anger and joy are like opposite sides of the same thing, but at a very deep root basis, there are two aspects of the universe and qualities stem from them. They can be mixed, but one can't in any way really be turned into the other without the intrusion of the divine. So being like, you got to take the ups and the downs. I'm not going to call that dualistic. If the downs are all caused by the Dark Lord, Prince of Evil, who formed it, then I'm going to say it. So the two aspects are baked into the cosmogony in some way, shape, or form. Some scholars think it's foolish to talk about Gnosticism as a religion. It's just a thing that religions sometimes have, in the same way that a lot of religions have a monastic tradition. And it would be foolish, like no one talks about monasticism as a religion generally. It's just an aspect that it can take on, where others think there's totally a religion that we would call Gnosticism, and it gets inflected in other religions. So there is Christian Gnosticism, much smaller Jewish Gnosticism, Mandeanism, Manichaeanism, which are going to be kind of the big ones that we talk about. One of the things I do like about Gnosticism, though, is it's one of the paradigms that gives us a clear notion of ascension. You return the divine spark. You gain union with the divine. You may have to die in the process. Ascension and destruction are the same. Ego death, take that. Kind of like if your goal of ascension is to return your heart to someone, you're not going to really be there after it happens. And that can be a mass ascension if you want it to be. Reveal the truth so clearly that everyone gets it.
This is one of those cases where it does feel like paradigm is the better word to describe it than religion or whatever else.
Yeah. Because it doesn't in and of itself necessarily answer questions of right action. And we're going to see that, where some people are like, the world is faulty and flawed, we must escape it, where other people are like, it still contains an aspect of the divine, we need to nurture and repair it. It doesn't necessarily answer those questions in the way that notionally a religion would. One of the things that makes this hard is we just don't have a lot to work with. Like, we didn't get the Gospel of Judas until the 1970s. The Nag Hammadi Codices, which contains the Gospel of Thomas, we got in 1945. There's also what I'm going to call the Baigent hypothesis, which is a lot of important texts from early Christianity and like late Second Temple Judaism through late antiquity are held in private collections, and they only slowly make it out in the world. So if we had access to all texts that humans have, our understanding of early Christianity would be wildly different, which is fun to think about, and I think super fun for a mage game.
Yeah, story hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you have vampires that are holding onto these heretical texts, or you do have the Greater Key of Solomon out there, like these purported texts that would be highly influential, or one that just completely undercuts it. We know the NWO is constantly hiding and revealing documents, because what is truth except for what people have access to?
I'm somewhat familiar with Gnostic texts. I've done a little bit of reading here and there. I've certainly not done the deep dive that I'm sure you did for this, I guess, episode.
I didn't learn Greek.
Fair. You should. It's lovely. What would you say is, like, maybe not an essential text, but what's the term?
Primer
an exemplar.
And Kyridian.
What would be an exemplar text of Gnosticism?
So the walkthrough of the creation I'm going to give is, in this case, the Secret Book according to John, which is attributed to the Apostle John, one of the followers of Jesus, Jesus being the central figure in Christianity, who argues that he was the Christ or the Messiah from the Hebrew Bible, that he would come to restore the kingdom of Israel, build the temple, establish world peace, judge righteously, and bring knowledge of God to all nations.
And this is not Revelation, John.
This is not Revelation, but this is attributed to the Apostle John.
Yeah.
So God isn't so much a being as a vast intelligence. God's thoughts are so great that they themselves are entities that move around the world. These are called Aeons. In Mage, the Aeons are the servitors of the Uthras or Celestines, which makes sense, as the Celestines are giant and unknowable. Interestingly, Uthra is another term which is only used in Book of Madness to talk about the high umbral Celestines, like the concept of joy or number or something like that. It's also a Mandean term for kind of a type of angel, and the Mandeans are an interesting Gnostic sect that kind of look to John the Baptist as one of it. And it's also interesting because Mandeanism is one of the few kind of Gnostic sects that primarily has been under Islamic rule and is considered a religion of the book. And they're like, yep, sure, fine. Have fun with that. So God is so vast that thoughts create powerful beings. John calls God the invisible spirit. God's first thought is called forethought and is the first thought of God. God is unknowable, but forethought we can know. That is the first thing that humans can know. Also called the Barbelo. One of the problems I had with copy and pasting this was the original text was in one of those ASCII ones that had a ridiculous number of characters. And when I copy and pasted it into Google Docs, I just got all the squares.
No.
All the little squares. So I'm like, Barbelo. So we have the first two parts of God, the invisible spirit, which is to say the imponderable and intractable portion of God, and forethought. And now God is like a place, which I like because this is a thing I would want to steal for Mage, where you don't meet Zeus and you're just in this realm that is Zeus filled with certain symbology or something like that. Or that is what the Celestines are. You will never see a Celestine, but you can inhabit or enter a Celestine, which is just kind of full of their symbolic things. This is also very much reminds me of the way component souls work in Exalted, where you would have a primordial that has 8 components to it. And you can never, like, Autothon is this giant weird space planet thing that is impossibly large, but his 8 component souls are out there doing stuff.
Mummies too have 8 component souls.
8 or 9?
Well, 9 is the body, right? So
yeah. Once forethought comes out, other things start kind of coming out, and they tend to emerge in male-female pairs. Prior acquaintance, incorruptibility, eternal life, and truth. They all kind of stare at each other for a moment, and then the divine self-originate, or the autogenes, appears, also called the Anointed One, or Christ. The invisible spirit, the Barbelo, and the divine self-originate form this kind of father, mother, son thing, and it's just weird to read it, and you're like, oh, he's called the divine self-originate. I wonder why this never became a dynamo of belief. Like, you really need a marketing department. The revelation of the Christ results in a bunch more eons, as God now has thoughts about these thoughts, for a total of 12, which are in 4 groups of 3, each led by a luminary: Harmazel, Oriel, Datai, I don't know how to pronounce that one.
Oh, you're just making sounds.
Yeah. You probably need the diacritics and everything to make sense.
Imagine how much of a chore it was to read this in Greek.
I mean, it would have been straightforward because you would know what all the symbols mean. But the Aeons at this point include things like word, perception, peace, intelligence, wisdom. The last Aeon, wisdom or Sophia, desires to think on her own without the assent of the invisible spirit or her consort. The Aeons are still marvelously powerful, and even an incomplete thought or unbalanced action was enough to create Yaldabaoth, which is cast out of the entirety, kind of this place of all the gods and the god thoughts, or yeeted from God realm, as I like to put it. Cast out from the nothing, Yaldabaoth decides to create a world from the nothing at hand, but being cast out from the perfection of the god realm, its recollection of divinity is flawed. And we get a world that has corruption and decay in it. Wisdom apologizes and be like, guys, I totally made an oopsie. And they're like, what do we do? And she's like, oh my God, I just the cosmos. What do I do? The Aeons are like, well, it's outside the entirety. How about we inspire the Yaldabaoth to create humans? Yaldabaoth does. And this is why Gnostics say that the Genesis gods keep saying we. In that apparently there wasn't a notion of the royal we. So when someone said we, they meant more than one person. So this is Yaldabaoth informed by the Aeons creating reality. So creates creatures, but they don't move. Eventually, the Aeons inspire Yaldabaoth, be like, hey, breathe some divine essence into your creation.
Literal inspiration.
Yeah. and create spirit beings. And the spirit beings, though, quickly gain power. They have divine essence and understanding. They realize that everything is wrong. And Yaldabaoth is like, shit, and just shoves it into the dirt humans that it had made. The dirt gets in the way of true understanding of God. Ta-da, we have humans. If the humans wish to return the divine spark to forethought, they must reach an understanding. And the term Gnostic comes from Gnostikoi, those who know. And it's used derisively, which I like. So it's part of that collection of words that initially was used as an insult, but isn't anymore, like meritocracy or Big Bang, where you're like, yes, the universe started with a Big Bang. And we're like, Big Bang. I like that. Was that originally an insult?
Yeah, well, so Impression Sunrise by Monet, when it came out, was like lambasted by the critics. And so it's like, oh, those impressionists. And
neat. And this was the term that was used by early church fathers like Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Clement of... Note, this version is kind of anti-Jewish, as it's like the god of Genesis is Yaldabaoth, the great deceiver who does battle with Sophia through humans, with Sophia trying to reveal and Yaldabaoth trying to obscure. That is just one version of the creation myth. And I use myth not necessarily to say that it is wrong, but merely that it is a story told to explain things. Valentinus had a version where the god of Genesis is actually just a lower part of God working as an agent, trying to do his damnedest. And this is why you have things like God saying, where are you? Because a true infinite God would have no question regarding these things. Valentinus also posited a different relationship where wisdom, or Sophia, visits mundane reality to help us realize the divine. And she is kind of this Hermes figure that brings wisdom to help us transcend our nature. The Gospel of Truth is probably the text or sermon that best holds this Valentinian view. Valentinus also used other terms like pleroma and fullness and syzygies and entities emerging from Bythos. Valentinians, you got cool words.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to have those to play with. But that's just kind of a sample creation. Yaldabaoth created this imperfect thing. Sophia is trying to repair things, and Yaldabaoth as an entity exists on a spectrum from is doing his darndest to is malevolent spirit actively trying to hide the divine essence and will create material entities to screw with it, which we'll get into later when we talk about like Dickian Gnosticism.
Gosh, Terry, that's a lot. How can I turn this into a source of magic with a K for my mage game?
Is it that boring?
No, well, it's because it's the kind of thing where when you see it all laid out and you're like, this is really complex and interesting and there's lots of moving parts to work with here, at what point do you kind of say, like, this is one guy going way off into his own head about his interpretation of some kind of body or school of thought that is forming around him? And at what point do you say, gonna make a religion out of this? And I mean, for the exercise of creating paradigm for a role-playing game, you don't really need to go far into it. But
and that's a useful way of talking about it, because we get into the, is Gnosticism a religion, or is it just a strain or a practice that's on top of others? And Valentinianism is very much Christianity, but it answers questions of like, what is the purpose of prayer? And it's not to ask God for things, but it's to request wisdom or to order one's thoughts. Like, what is the purpose of charity? Not necessarily to help others, but kind of to refine the self and reduce your attachment to the material world. So it's super useful in that if you're already living in a society, it helps give you different answers to the questions of how should I conduct my life? But to the question of like, where does magic come from? I had a couple. One is arcane physics. Yaldabaoth creates the world. He needs rules to set it into place. A subset of that is physics. Yaldabaoth needs to run the show and has other secrets and controls. And when you do magic, you're more or less taking advantage of these. Maybe it is a connection to Sophia. Sophia is wisdom, and through her you have access to forethought. Magic comes from the ability to interface with the Aeons, who have the ability to influence the work of Yaldabaoth. Reality is arranged by request, or if you want to go the Hermetic way, command of the Aeons. It could be divine nature. By accessing our spiritual or psychic parts, more on that in a bit, we can change reality. You're a special breed that has a different connection to everything else. Valentinus said basically that there are three types of people: those who are merely material, those who are material and spiritual, those who are material, spiritual, and psychic. And each of them has a different level of understanding and gets into a really interesting ethical dilemma, because there are interpretations where people who are just matter are pea-zombies. Who cares about them? And I like this because, again, to go back to the Cultists of Ecstasy, we had that baller revised thing that's like, if you're not awakened, who cares? And if you're not going to awaken, you don't matter. And
you only matter.
Yeah.
But
that kind of belief that someone is so second class that their existence doesn't matter. And in fact, killing them could be doing them a favor, maybe better luck next life, I think is a a pretty metal thing that naturally should come up in a game, even if we all say, no, that's horrible.
So that's like the Cult of Ecstasy, Euthanatos power couple kind of thing.
well, when they spent 2 or 3 centuries just killing technocrats. Big fan of that. It could be your connection to the entirety. We get the idea in Valentinianism that there's something outside of reality that could help us manipulate it. We learn to touch this stuff to work it. So by going outside of this material shell, we have access to the entirety, or we have access to the void between, and that gives us to it. Or one idea is that magic is a trap, that mages are the most enlightened and have the best chance of breaking through. And mages are kind of people who figured out how to escape, and Yaldabaoth needs a way to keep them here, and magic is that way to do it. The analogy I have is if a prison had an open door, if it were a vast complex, but somewhere there was an exit, but that the cleverest and hardest working prisoners were given nicer accommodations, it would probably slow their quest to leave, being like, no, don't look for it. You're very smart. You're probably tired from the day. Here's some books. Here's some better food. Here's some...
It's like a retirement village.
Yeah, to keep mages occupied. In which case, someone who actively uses magic would be kind of the least awakened.
So I know people are, hot or cold on the sample paradigms in M20, for example, but reading through like these, it kind of makes me, I feel like I can point to each of them. So like arcane physics, that's like turning the keys to reality in M20 list of paradigm examples terms. Connection to Sophia, all power comes from gods. Divine nature, we are all gods. And then the reality is a prison. So yeah, I mean, I think that is useful in the sense of one of the hardest things for me to get into the mindset of how Gnosticism works is that source of magic piece, like answering the question, why can a mage who follows this worldview, how does that empower them? So yeah, I mean, I dig it.
I appreciate the sheer mastery you have of the paradigms in M20.
I mean, I sat with them for many moons, so yeah. So then when it comes to going back to the P-zombie question, I guess, how do the awakened mages who espouse somewhere on this spectrum of ideas, whether they do believe, oh, you're just matter and I don't care about you, to you're savable and everyone can awaken, like that kind of ideology we see in Mage, how would this paradigm kind of hash out the difference between the awakened and sleepers?
So let's go back and define a P-zombie. So a P-zombie is a philosophical question, which I will summarize as saying there are people out there that look and act like people, but they are not truly conscious. They are just remarkably complicated machines and mechanisms that emulate human action, but there is no inner narrative.
Yeah.
Which I find funny because over time we've realized that there are aphantasics, people who don't like get mental images or at least don't parse them the same way, and that there's a further level where some people don't have an internal monologue. So I just find it funny where people are like, what if someone didn't have an internal monologue? It's like, you mean like this recognized neurological condition? Get out of your hole, Charles Sayre.
I was thinking more chatbots with hands, but
there is an argument that some people make to being like, well, if you don't have that inner narrative, you're not truly human. And a variant of this is like, are there people out there that are humans but don't have souls? And that would then raise a question of what is the value of that person's life? And the best example of this being raised is probably Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, aka Blade Runner, where it's like, yeah, they sure look like humans and they scream when you stab them, but they're just replicants. To which my answer is, FFS, if it can scream in pain, please don't stab it.
And it's interesting, as science continues to investigate these questions, we discover that more and more things are actually screaming in pain.
Have the ability to scream in pain.
So, yeah.
Yeah. But Dick very much thought that there was this division between people who were strictly material and people that were spiritual. And his question was, if replicants aren't, what do? And the question is, if you don't know which you are, do you want to know?
Well, and the side question is, how do you prove it, and should we try?
Well, the answer is the void contest.
Yeah.
Which would be great to have in Mage. Be like, is this person awakened or not? This ultimately ties to your answer to the question of what is the source of magic. It requires you to know something, a gnosis, a sense that is intimate, immediate, and non-transferable as a form of wisdom. It is something that you can point people towards, but you can't directly transfer in the same way that I could transfer to you knowledge of the population of Philadelphia or what the capital of like Belgium is. It could be those who have been visited by Sophia. The awakened have been visited by Sophia and are part of her army that try and slay deceit. This can result in some interesting conclusions if all awakened have been touched by Sophia. Maybe the Nefandi have received a tainted wisdom, or a visit from a fallen eon like regret or dissolution. Maybe it is Sophia and the only way out is to kill everyone and tear it down to return the light of God. Technocrats may consider Sophia to be the enlightenment of science. Or you could have a real weird one where the technocracy wants to become so advanced that it can create another god or a godnet that allows us to communicate beyond it. And again, this blends two things I didn't think I'd mention in the same episode. The cyber papacy from Torg and Validus from Philip K. Dick. Valentinians categorize humans into three types: the spiritual, which is to say the pneumatic, the psychic, and the material, or the hylic. This categorization determines one's capacity for gnosis and salvation. It may be the case that the psychic are able to do linear magic and the pneumatic can do true magic, or that psychics are awakened and can become pneumatic to ascend. The interesting thing here is that Valentinians could be viewed that there were, again, merely material mortals, and that would be their P-zombies. And the question is, what do you do then? And the answer in most cases is, we get more than one go at this. The material is recycled. This comes in one of two forms. One is reincarnation, where you come back within this, your material is reformed. Another one is this variant, sometimes called metempsychosis, where eventually this world will run its course and we will get a new world and everyone gets a go in that. So if you die now, you're not coming back to the same material world if you haven't joined the Pleroma.
It's a beautiful word too.
Pleroma?
Metempsychosis.
It is.
I also need to point out that hylic literally just means made of wood.
Oh.
Just, you could be pneumatic, psychic, or made of wood.
I like that you said nomadic, not pneumatic.
Sorry, vowels.
They're hard. Magic can come from those who have been touched by an eon of some sort. Maybe each essence is tied to a luminary, where Alele is tied to questing, and Sophia and wisdom, that Harmanzel ties to stasis and grace. Oriel is primordial and ties to insight, and Devantai ties to dynamic or intelligence or something like that. So all of these give you an answer of both anyone can do it and you really have to be special. So it comes down firmly on all sides of the issue, which is always a good sign. But
Mage.
yeah, but it's one of those things kind of like Hermeticism or Calvinism, where they kind of believe that certain people can do it. It's just really hard to tell, and you really need to push them to figure that out.
Kind of like only by pushing them can you tell.
Yes. So a lot of people may have been touched by Sophia and not realize it, but the moment in awakening is when you go, oh. Or you could say Sophia visits you then. I like the idea because this supports my weird revised notion that you don't have an avatar until you awaken. And that is the moment where Sophia visits you and it's just like, boop, you have an avatar now. So she is kind of like the psychopomp.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's what it reminds me of. It also makes me think that there should have been a 90s television show that was touched by a Gnostic angel. And just
I would have watched it. Touched by an Uthra.
At the climax, like the giant, many-eyed, many-winged seraphim shows up. Like, that would have been...
Be not afraid. But it would have been 90s. It would have been like, I have some baller shit to drop on you.
There would have been a tie-in rap.
Hey, kids, stay in school.
I really like the idea of the places of emanations being, or did you say aeons, I guess? Places.
God is a place.
Yeah. That brings up the question of what does this do for the actual structure of Otherworlds per this paradigm?
Yeah, this gives us an interesting answer to the question of like, so what are the other worlds? They could be the backstage. This is the area where Yaldabaoth does its work. Stepping into the other worlds allows you to see the forces pushing and pulling on mundane reality. I like this idea as it doesn't make the other worlds a retreat and it doesn't make it like closer to God. In fact, it does the opposite. You're now very much in the realm of the enemy. You can do some pretty wild stuff there, but maybe Yaldabaoth has a shanty of their own. If you look through the first book of Madness, it suggested that Yaldabaoth does have a realm, this great serpentine area somewhere in the deep umbra. This could be the world of the psychic, where higher beings are able to manifest. It could be the space between our fallen world, the prison of Yaldabaoth, or the realm of Yaldabaoth, and the entirety, the God domain, as it were. It could just be the vast void that kind of stems between them. And I kind of like that as a thing, that it kind of answers that question, that when you create a personal domain, what you're really doing is you are taking your wisdom to carve something out of that void. I think that's a pleasing answer to that question.
I just had this random notion, because I think at least from what I recall of the bits that I've read, there at least some Gnostic texts say that there are 20 emanations. That's kind of like one of the numbers that gets thrown around.
That's one of the numbers that gets thrown around. 4, 5, 12, 16,
Okay.
2021, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, do you include God in it? Do you include Yaldabaoth?
Yeah.
Do you include Christ as a thing?
I'm just thinking it would be interesting for someone to awaken. It's like, first trip to the Umbra, and it's like, oh, there are 20 Shade Realms. We don't know how that happened. Like, what are these other Shade Realms doing here?
Step 1, we need any information on the Shade Realm. Step 2, we need more of them.
Yes.
That is generally my answer to any otherworldly question.
So to the question of which text, so obviously there's diverse answers to any of these questions. You've mentioned a couple. You mentioned Valentinius. You mentioned Philip K. Dick. Who else is kind of in the constellation of Gnostic inflected authors that would be useful?
A lot of this is inflected beforehand from the works of Plato. One of his dialogues, Timaeus, gives us the idea of the craftsman or creator, which he called the demiurge. This is a much more positive view of things.
I've always hated the word demiurge. It's half an urge.
Or it's a lesser urge.
Yeah. Like, kind of want a pastry.
If you're in the mood, I could be. Yeah. That's a demiurge.
Well, and you get your demitas.
Plato didn't have negative connotations to the demiurge, still had this idea of a higher and a lower reality, but kind of in the same way that you would have an upper and a lower house of parliament. Like, one isn't necessarily worse, both are involved in the operations of things. We should probably do an episode on Platonism at some point, but it gets real...
Who's the we in that sentence?
Yeah, sorry. The royal we.
All right.
Me and my eons.
The Gnostic we.
Yeah. And then we have Valentinius, who is an early 2nd century or late 2nd century author, only known from snippets, possible author of the Gospel of Truth. The 2 books I read that specifically mention him is like, yeah, he was probably the author. So I'm like, I'm giving it to him. Clearly believed in a dualistic world with a higher universe of thoughts and forms, and a lower one, a world of phenomena. And that's very much inspired by Plato. Valentinius was generally less anti-Jewish in the sense that he wasn't like, Hebrews all wrong. We have Plotinus, who was the founder of Neoplatonism, and he did a tract called Against the Gnostics, which is useful because it lists what he thought the Gnostics were doing. Again, this is one of those difficult things because it's like when we get the diaries of John Smith talking about contact with the America's First Nations, and it's like, I don't know how much I'm going to believe you, but like, I understand that you wrote what you think you saw, plus a little bit more to justify what you did, plus a little bit more to zhuzh up sales. He said that the Gnostics were misunderstanding Plato's dichotomy, and that's partly how we think that early Gnostics were dualistic. His big thing was saying the universe wasn't flawed and terrible, it was lower, but it wasn't per se bad. And kind of another figure in the history of Gnosticism to really think about is Philip K. Dick. Dick was fascinated by the writings of early Christians, and he lived in the time when the Nag Hammadi library was unearthed, quite literally. Then on 2/3/1974, February 3rd, 1974, he received a revelation. A beam of pink light came from the cosmos and revealed to him some higher reality. This was considered later in his Valis trilogy and had been led up to kind of in his previous works, the 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and Ubik, whose Gnostic themes are pretty strong. These works are dualistic, generally with the demiurge being malevolent. So anytime the demiurge is like very much a prison force, I consider that more of a Dickian Gnosticism things. Dick thought that escape could be reached technologically or pharmacologically in some cases, sometimes not. Through a scanner darkly, not a great time. To me, Dickian Gnosticism involves an active jailer, technology as a force of transcendence and control, some sort of inner transformation, no need for Jesus, and the idea that agents in reality work with the demiurge. So the demiurge doesn't just create reality, but has oppressive forces within it. They are behind the global conspiracy. The demiurge justifies paranoia as being part of the greater good.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that maybe this is the one that I could see fitting best into Mage, of like all this sort of strands of Gnostic thought.
If you want to have that forward-moving plot, yes. Yeah. And it creates really strange bedfellows because you have the person that's like, reality is a prison, technology will help us circumvent it. It just so happens that the greatest technological force in the game is fundamentally authoritarian. So like, how do we square these two? And now we get into this weird place of like, what does your Gnostic group do in this game? We liberate technology because we need to transmit our message and we need to help sleepers do it. This is the kind of thing where it's like, no, we're going to put LSD in the water supply.
I was thinking more like feeding sheets of acid into the CD-ROM drive and like seeing what that does.
Yeah.
Crazy wisdom.
Yep. The thing to me is in Dickian Gnosticism, like the agents of oppression are active. It's not just the nature of reality, but there are entities in reality that are doing it. And this is kind of the awakening view where you have the tetrarchy. What the hell is it called? Do you remember? Who are the bad guys? Seers of the Throne?
Something
like that. In the fullness of time, I will read them as well, but...
Do you know what? My knowledge of that game sank like Atlantis, so...
Wah, wah. And then kind of the other half of like the important people are like the religious figures within it, like figures that are unusually important compared to the rest of history. One of them would be Simon Magus, Simon the Sorcerer, a figure from Acts of the Apostles, gets a lot of attention from the Gnostics because he seemed to have extraordinary mystic knowledge and may have been enlightened, a revealer of divine wisdom. Also the person after which Simony is named because he's like, I would like to buy my way into your club. And they're like, no, you can't do that. He's like, I also have magic, which to me makes him like the ultimate hermetic. And that's why he pops up in Hermeticism too. This gives us the idea to me that Gnostic mages may investigate historical wizards. And now you are on the quest to steal John Dee's book and reflecting mirror, or to find Nostradamus's bowl, or to find Simon Magus's tomb. And that gives you that Indiana Jones chronicle, like Gnosticism on the go.
I have in fact made Nostradamus's cherry jam from his recipe.
Oh, neat. What's notable about it?
It's just simple, straightforward, and like was done right 500 years ago, and very few cherry jams since have been as...
I mean, he foresaw that. He came from, he saw the ultimate cherry jam and brought it back so that you could experience it in the future.
Yeah.
Like that cherry jam wasn't going to be invented until the 2200s if he hadn't seen it ahead of time.
Yeah, but the quatrains are all about like skulls spouting smoke that screams or whatever, so it's, hard to...
Is that how you would describe the jam, or...
No, his recipe, I imagine, in the initial book was cut later.
To the rest of Christians, frequently Simon Magus is considered a symbol of heresy. His tie to the Gnostics was being like, hey, there was Simon Magus, get them out of here. Purportedly introduced pagan and mystic elements. So if you want to go with your Hermetic route, you've got your Hermes Trismegistus angle or your Thothian way. But in addition to that, if you want to have your Verbena Gnostic to be like, hey, nature is the true source of wisdom and all this edifice on top of it is concealing that, you can kind of point at Simon Magus as a character. Another one that pops up that I would kind of be remiss not to include would be Mary Magdalene, represented in mystic teachings as receiving separate revelations or having different wisdom. Many Gnostics believe that emanations came in male-female pairs, and she received wisdom from Jesus either separately or got it, what for being a lady and such. Note, Gnostics considered male and female necessary and both part of it. We have little indication that they believe that they were equal, in the same way that it's like, yes, Eve is necessary, but derivative and partial and flawed in some way. So is man, and you're welcome, obviously, to zarch that from your view. John the Baptist is also very important to the Mandeans. We'll get to that later. Mani pops up, a 3rd century Persian prophet who combined elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism, born in about 1216 in Mesopotamia. At the age of 24, received a revelation that a divine being called him the Apostle of Light, posited a very dualistic worldview, which he took from Zoroastrianism, believed that Jesus was the Savior, took that from Christianity, and believed that you had to have this kind of ascetic and contemplative life, which we think he probably ganked from Buddhism. And this is one of those weird things where like this religion was huge from the 3rd to 5th century, expanded into the Roman Empire, was very attractive across classes, started to decline in the late 5th century, and the last remnant is kind of gone by the 8th century. It has influenced other religions and thought. The idea that it's where we get the word Manichaean from, the idea that good can only produce good. So if you're a good person, anything you do has to be good.
So within this paradigm, how would something like quintessence or task be understood?
Couple ways for this. Quintessence could be the pure stuff that the demiurge used to forge reality. These are bits of the void, the area, or maybe emanations from the entirety, or these are little hints that the Aeons have been able to sneak in. Kind of like reality and waiting. It could be the void that the demiurge used to create everything. Could be gifts from Sophia that help mages understand the world and gain brief understanding. And avatars could be the tug of Sophia or those who've ascended before helping us now. So a mage who ascends comes back as an avatar to kind of guide the next generation of mages.
All right.
And kind of similarly, the spheres become representations of particular aeons. Maybe you're good at working with forethought or good at working with wisdom. Maybe mind is insight and time is possibility, and represents your ability to ask these aeons for help, or your ability to interpret and find their signs baked into reality. Spheres, alternatively in the Dickian sense, could be controls of reality that you've worked out, or things that you've pulled back from Yaldabaoth.
I'm thinking obviously about minor spheres and also pillars in terms of like how this might, although pillars, I mean, I guess you had there were 4
the
things.
Luminaries,
the
yes.
Luminaries. So I guess you could have pillars based on that. But now I'm also thinking like 20 minor spheres. And Interesting. Are there any magical with a K effects within this paradigm that would either be completely straightforward or completely off the table?
To me, I think interacting with the Umbra would be very straightforward. They're like, I get this. I understand the mapping. Two Gnostics wouldn't necessarily agree with each other on it, but they would consider it, I am a higher being. I have revealed my psychic or spiritual aspect. I am entering that world. I am back to where I am. Some people could consider it going to enemy territory, though. So the thing about this paradigm is it kind of gets a pass with like, everything is an illusion. I can create a portal because space is just an illusion. So the bigger thing is you're not ruling things out so much as you're saying, does this play into the illusion or does this play towards revelation? Pattern effects that make you more tied to the material world would probably be a no-no. Generating gold, increasing your strength, especially increasing your appearance would kind of be antithetical in most cases. These are things that would just tie you to the illusion further.
Yeah.
And it might be one of those things where you can do it, but you need to go through a cleansing ritual afterwards, or you need to make offerings, or you need to more than make up for it by shedding wealth or material concerns thereafter. Manipulating technology for old school Gnostics would be illusion on illusion on illusion on illusion. And I wouldn't be surprised if your avatar is just like +1 difficulty, buddy. We don't want to dirty our hands with that. Key one to me would be manipulating the minds of others. One of the ideas that we get in Gnosticism is once Sophia has been revealed, it is your choice to pursue or reject it, and that choice must be made freely.
The caveat, though, is it okay to manipulate the quote-unquote mind of a P-zombie?
Yes. Well, at that point, the question is, do they have a mind to manipulate?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if you had a character that's like, I can only use the mind sphere on other mages.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, oh, if I want to manipulate a P-zombie, one of these strictly material people, I can use life 2 to make them angry, but there's really no higher thought in there. They're just kind of on autopilot. It gets you to some weird areas pretty quickly, which I am fine with, what for it being Mage. Time is also a case where the idea of the flow of cause and effect is kind of meaningless because time is more or less the direction of corruption. I could also see entropy in the fallen world being a bad thing to use. You are merely expediting the destruction of all things. Another one would be creating a fetish, drawing a spirit. If you think that spirits are that other type of entity and drawing them into the material world, you would have to do a heck of a lift to justify that. You would need to couch it in terms of advancing the spirit's agenda. They would probably balk at giving in-kind chiminage, like, have a bunch of frogs to be a frog for the frog god, or start a bunch of fires. And it's like, you're just reinforcing
frogs for the frog god.
Reinforcing their tie to the material world. So if I were to run with this as a character at character creation, I'd probably pick 2 or 3. Yeah. I would come up with probably a forbidden sphere. And to me, that's not really a big thing because the number of games that actually run to the point where a character gets all 9 spheres doesn't really happen.
And also something like, going back to the idea of Dick Gnosticism. But like with that strand of Gnosticism, I would see them as being much more invested in manipulating technology, or something like not creating fetishes because that imprisons the spirits in the material. Maybe there would be some version of that where like fetishes are off the table, but talons are okay because then you're just transferring, maybe you're helping that spirit get to where it needs to go to do what it needs to do.
And I could see the Dickian Gnostics having a problem with mind control because you're just being another totalitarian force, or you don't want to interface with things that represent the symbols of power that orthodoxy has created. You can't have any dots in rank. You can't have any dots in influence. You can't generate money because that's just an illusion created by the demiurge and perpetrated through its agents to keep people down. And those would be the things that you're impeded from doing. And your penance for that is suddenly like, no, you need to stage an underground rock concert or something like that, or a slam poetry competition, or put up 10,000 banners saying like,
come to
a cab or something. Yeah.
please come to our slam show. As a general question, when it comes to paradigms and stuff like this in Mage, to what extent do you think they should have these kinds of restrictions and commandments, I suppose?
Well, so I think they're needed because it's too easy to say I can do whatever I want whenever I want.
Yeah.
So it also gives it something for your character to grow past over time. And I think it makes it super fun to interact in game when my character thinks it's morally objectionable to create money. I like when mages have a different moral code than the rest of humanity in either direction. Being like, no, I'm perfectly fine killing a sleeper, but to kill another mage,
Yeah.
For mages to have notions of crimes that mortals don't, to be like, I can't believe you use entropy. Like, you're just accelerating the decay of the material world.
I can't believe you had a slam poetry show.
So yeah, I think it's really important to have those limitations. It's fun. It exercises your creativity and how do I work around these. So I think it's useful, as in with any creative endeavor, to have it. It also gives you something to transcend as your arete increases, or maybe as your arete increases, the number of impediments you have, you realize, kind of like a hierarchy of sins. Like previously I felt comfortable doing this. I'm no longer comfortable using life to increase my appearance, where previously I was fine with that, or something like that.
Which is a lot more interesting than shedding instruments. Like, if as you advance, and this is something, again, going back to having sat with that list of paradigms for many months to work on the book I did, it's, sorry, shameless, pitching within the episode.
It's not shameless. Like, my favorite kind of text is, this is a neat idea, but how the heck do I do it? I have spent dozens or hundreds of hours making sense of it, and here's a cool thing that comes out the other end. I mean, you and Charles have both done it.
That idea of the advancement of arete being more tied to kind of life events, or these sort of quantum leaps of understanding that are discernible within the context specifically of the paradigm. That, I think, is where Mage goes beyond just, leveling up in a sense. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah, and arete then becomes the degree to which you're able to push away the material world, let the Pleroma or the fullness or the entirety or an Aeon or an Uthra kind of step in. And the other thing to kind of go back one is, now what do the Gnostics think of wraiths? You're stuck on the lie. So the degree to which they want to help wraiths becomes a question of, like, how dimly do you view specters? Because specters are obviously going to be bad, but, like, come on, man, let go. I wanted to insert a question on, like, how Gnostics view other night folk.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of Gnostics viewing redcaps as agents of the Aeon of consumption or unity to make all a part of the self. And you would get to these really weird places where, like, are the She the Archons of Justice, or are they Archons of Command, or something like that?
Changelings are just filled with Pleroma. I mean,
a little too much Pleroma.
I don't know if that's how it works.
That's why you have to burp them.
So returning to the subject of practices and instruments, what would you say are, like, the key things for this paradigm?
The key practices and instruments, to me, I focus on instruments generally, because if you get 2 out of the 3, you got a Mage effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you got paradigm and instrument, we can figure out the practice. If you got practice and instrument, we can figure out a paradigm. You can always figure out the other one. Meditation is going to be the most common. Align your thoughts with the world around you. Listen to the inspiration of the avatar. Anything close to that, chanting, is going to be a common one, with music as a metaphor for reality and its manipulation. Again, music giving us these basic elements that can be combined to create something greater, to remind us that we are just one note in the chord of reality. Rituals, if you want to affect someone. Anointing would be a common one. This is a case where it would be high ritual, where you have the symbolic reenactment of things. You may come up with a play where the male and female emanations of an Aeon are talking through something and trying to figure out how this magical effect will maintain harmony with the other parts of the entirety or the Pleroma. Creative actions like painting and song could be viewed as a manifestation of our divine nature, and I wouldn't be surprised if a character said, only those with Pneuma are able to truly create. So now we have the weird marauder who, like, slays a whole bunch of accountants if he can't find evidence that they have, like, night jobs or are part of a jam band.
Awkward.
Yeah. Symbol manipulation is another common one, where you say, hey, there is a language to reality. That is the encoded wisdom of the Aeons or Sophia. So through that kind of text manipulation, I can change the world around me. The thing with this is, a lot of what you're going to do is kind of going to be vulgar, and that is the trade-off for being able to do a lot. It's really hard to conceal it. And you may even say that unless you're a Dickian Gnostic, and no, paranoia and concealment are part of the game until we do our grand reveal, you have to do these things in public. You have to let people know. You have to reveal this wisdom, even if the demiurge in its form of paradox comes to punish you. You have to bear that willingly. You have to show others.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the trade-off there.
And it's interesting to think about whether or not different Gnostic mages would perceive paradox as being actively malevolent or not.
Yeah, or a blessing. This is the degree to which you have misunderstood the teachings of Sophia.
Yeah.
It's a class of paradigms. I could write up one, and if I do, I'll probably do an old school Valentinian one and then a Dickian version, because the Dickian one is just kind of fun. And it's weird to see how many times it recurs in society and media.
Any particular rotes that you would throw in?
The Mandeans view flowing water, baptism, and anointing as a big one. So I like the tableau of characters stepping sideways by like descending into a river and disappearing. The other one is uploading yourself to the digital web through extensive interfacing with the symbolic text of one of these ancient Greek texts, or doing it in Aramaic to transform it to form the sigil of portal that allows you to go into the digital web. Another one would be to injure a spirit or control mind, or to do entropic magic against an organization by accumulating symbols of oppression and just doing this reverse book burning, this mass destruction of what you consider to be the symbols of authoritarianism from the demiurge. Another one would be an extensive dialogue with someone to try and figure out the luminary that you both tie to. And that's how you set up the sympathetic link that allows you to teleport to them later on. Another one would be coming up with an artistic rendering of what you think the true nature of an object is by peeking into the umbra, by having discourse with its allied spirits, and then modifying that to change it. That's how you get your alchemical transformation or something, to be like, in the same way that we are luminous beings, this coffee cup has a truer form that I'm going to allow it to manifest as it becomes a shield or gets turned into gold or something like that. A lot of them are relatively slow and paradox prone. And that's, again, kind of the trade-off for being able to do whatever you want. Again, unless we're going with the Dickian interpretation.
I'm just thinking about like a coffee cup that says like world's best dad, and you somehow like draw that into reality, and you really are the best. So looking at this outline, it does seem that there are some listener questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to somewhat handle some of them.
Okay.
So this was one of those ones where I created the channel for this over 2 years ago. And it accumulated things, it lost things. For anyone who's curious, when I'm going through the episode, I literally use the search feature to find the exclamation mark and the question mark. So if you don't use one of those, I just don't see it. So if it doesn't come up, sorry. One of them is, isn't Gnosticism more an awakening thing? Yeah, sure. It's certainly there, but it's certainly baked into Mage as well. You have the idea of the worm, you have the idea of Yaldabaoth, you have the idea of the pure ones. I think it's really baked into both games. The idea of there being a fallen world is more directly awakening, but I mean, everything in World of Darkness says our world is in some way flawed and broken. So I really think they're in both. Yes, I think awakening is a little bit more on the nose, but I think that notion of a flawed reality that God has stepped away from is kind of baked into World of Darkness in a basic way.
So you mentioned that this also came out of your research or background research for the Celestial Chorus section, which to me always implies Christianity, even though I know they're multi-confessional or whatever. Are there other groups not associated with Christianity that could be Gnostified?
You have the Mandeans, but are taking it far enough away, I feel, that it brings you to an interesting location. In fact, to the point where there are groups within the Mandeans who consider Jesus a distraction, and really John the Baptist was the true revealer. And just the fact that it was surrounded by Islam for so long gets you to a different place. Like, you can see how those two were in communication would be strong, but it is interesting to see how the twists and turns of Islamic philosophy and mysticism kind of informed Mandeanism. And it has a different ritual set, it has different sacred texts, and that's just kind of a fun place to look at. And it's interesting to dig into the beliefs of a comparatively small group that probably has 100,000 or fewer practitioners in the modern world. Stemming off of this, you have the idea of Greek mystery cults that have a different version of Gnosis, that there is understanding that needs to be revealed, generally not dualistic, generally not believing that reality is a prison. There are some Eastern interpretations that have our reality needing to be restored to the whole in some way that give you a line. From Lurianic Kabbalah, we have the notion that God created vessels, the vessels shattered, and we as humans need to bring that back together. This is kind of where one of the roots of the notion of heal the world. The idea of Jewish Gnosticism is a thing unto itself. It's big and it's already embedded in a very expansive mysticism. So I'm hesitant to say anything about it because I don't have the predicate knowledge to really touch on it. But those are probably the directions I would go. The other one is the Dickian modern thing. Yeah. Reality is directly a prison. You have the idea that there is some sort of technology that we could use to either spread the word to others, which is just raw communication, Or there is some technological insight that will literally allow us to shatter the illusion, the Valis technology, or that what we need to do is create an entity that is all of us, that is so powerful that it can directly challenge Yaldabaoth or the Demiurge. And just the idea that we kind of need to connect all of humanity into a giant mecha to fight our prisoner is just kind of badass.
Humanitron.
Yes, yes.
So I see that on these notes, the biggest item, I guess we could just boil it down to, apart from Mage, where else can we see Gnosticism in the WOD?
Gnosticism in the World of Darkness comes up in a bunch of places. I don't consider it synonymous with reality as a prison or reality as false. Otherwise, the simulation hypothesis becomes Gnostic, the idea that we're all just in a giant computer simulation. The other two requirements are kind of dualism and an interest in a direct knowledge of God. Now, the most direct one we get is the Cainite Heresy, which is for vampire dark ages, that believe Cain was the favored son and that Jesus was the second incarnation of Cain. A third coming of Cain would free everyone from the prison of reality. It looks to destroy the false church of Catholicism, and with it, the danger of true faith. And true faith is the symbol of the demiurge, that you are so committed to the demiurge that you can repel the true divinity that is Cain and vampirism. Salvation requires gnosis through knowledge of Cain, which is to say, being a vampire, experiencing the blood. Cain was a creature of spirit and matter and was rejected by the demiurge, whereas Abel was just material and his offerings heaped praise upon the demiurge and made it happy. Cain saw that this was not the right way of things and killed Abel. God's quote-unquote curse, by which he became super powerful, sexy night creature, that was actually God marking Cain as having had this higher wisdom. The third Cain was supposed to enter reality in 1206, stick around for 33 years, and bring about Gehenna in 1239, at which point the time of thin blood would start. With 800 years of hindsight, they kind of missed. The idea was that Cain was the child of Lilith, who had both spirit and pneuma, and Abel was merely body. The interesting thing here is, one, you got Cain, two, you got Jesus, and then you got third Cain. So we get a vampire. The Hermetics called Jesus a magician. So maybe third Cain is a mummy? I just want it to be some weird other night folk, or maybe we get a changeling true fae weird ass thing that is going to deliver us all from things.
Changeling mummy.
Chummy.
Yaldabaoth.
Another interesting reference occurs in the Book of Madness, where Yaldabaoth is listed as a powerful being on the level of Gaia, that it has a giant serpent body somewhere deep in the Umbra. It is serviced by the Nephandi, the Black Spiral Dancers, and spirit and serpent spirits. The worm is just the bestial aspect of it, and Ial is the cognitive or higher umbral counterpart. This was back when beings would have a middle and a high umbra aspect, which I kind of like to bring back. Another place that became big is the Cathars, who in 11 and 1200s in South France, northern Italy, in the Languedoc. How do you actually say that?
Languedoc.
But you actually say the C.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. They were dualistic. They rejected the Catholic Church, had two levels of membership, the Perfecti that were strictly ascetic, and the Credentes, or believers who weren't ascetic but supported the Perfecti. Probably got support from nobles who were tired of dealing with the Catholic Church, so they're like, let's see how this turns out. Largely scattered during what was known as the Albigensian Crusade, named after the city of Albi, when Pope Innocent in 1209 was like, do something! The war was slow and killed tens of thousands, and ended when the nobles agreed to start an inquisition to root out heresy. What other heresy existed in the Languedoc region? The Convention of the White Tower, because this is where Mistridge was. It is considered pretty well gone by the 14th century, except in the World of Darkness where it lived on. Likewise, the Cainite heresy lived on and eventually formed the Church of Cain, or inflected it, which we know kind of as the Sabbat. The Mandeans receive mention in Dark Ages grimoire as a still extant sect that's part of the Celestial Chorus. It draws heavily from John the Baptist, as I mentioned, as a central prophet and teacher. Rituals like baptism are important, and unlike other Gnostics, they tended to get married and have kids. More people gives the opportunity for more light into the world, which can then be returned to God, as opposed to other people who are like, why do you want to introduce more people into...
But they don't get pillars.
They don't get pillars. Hard to point to the origins, but the Book of John, the Ginzaraba, or Great Treasure, the Kolasta, or Prayer Book, contain the outlines of the ideas of this fight of light versus darkness, salvation, and kind of the soul's journey. So we get it in a bunch of places. Other people would consider Demon to be fundamentally Gnostic in a way. Yes, you're looking for direct knowledge of God, but I don't think Demon the Fallen ever gives us enough information on what that communion looks like. I just talked a lot. How does that compare to what you know about Gnosticism and how you jam it into a game?
Well, I don't. That's generally how I go. No, but I mean, it is It is interesting because you can really see a lot of the roots of some of the systems and structures that we see in Mage. And I say that both in terms of talking about things like duality and things like material versus the spiritual, but also just in terms of the fuzziness and the interpretability. And to me, one of the things that makes Mage itself is that you can have characters having like deep philosophical arguments about not only their beliefs, but how they're able to manifest those beliefs. Gnosticism kind of seems like, if not a direct inspiration for that kind of approach, it shares the same kind of, I don't know, impulse underneath it. So,
and I guess my last thought is I do think this fits into a lot of different traditions. And that's kind of the important part to me. You could have the VA that fundamentally feels the digital web as a realm of communication, and pure thought is closer to God. It abandons the material and all the imperfections there. We can all just be our best selves out there. You obviously have the celestial chorus angle where you feel that you need to maintain a community or group to spread this. You have the verbena angle where nature is that pure embodiment and civilization is just a contrivance that ties us to the material world. Dream speakers who view these other worlds as a great place, that these other peoples out there, other entities created by the eons, and only together do we have the ability to come back in union. I could certainly see a quest to tear down the gauntlet as being erasing of that. You have the Akashics who want to kind of free themselves from the constraints of the body or the imperfections that come. So one of the ideas could be perfect understanding of the flawed material is what is required to transcend it. So you have the ecstatic notion that sensory experience allows us to go outside these, and that we need to spread this to other people, that maybe pleasure allows us to kick back against the form of the prison. The Euthanatoi, who are very interested in picking off the elements that are most tying us to it. You can very much have your Dickian assassin that is just taking out politicians and who is very much in favor.
Dick the Ripper.
Yes. There is a tie between Gnosticism and Hermeticism through the Poimandres manuscript, which is one of the only Hermetic things that really mentions Christianity directly. What traditions have I missed?
Sons of Ether, Etherites.
So the Etherites to me comes in a couple of different ones. One, the idea that the space of truth could represent everything outside of the prison. That by bringing more and more into it, we could essentially blow it open, that we could return to the entirety when all truth and all possibility becomes around. Also, I think all Society of Ether members are a little bit conspiracy theorists.
Just a tad.
Just a tad, especially if you have that technosis angle on it. M20 makes a bunch of references to Gnosticism, but it's just like reality is illusion, which isn't necessarily new to Mage in any interesting ways.
Etherites, I was thinking when you were talking about the immersion and water thing, and then also kind of the opportunities for technology, I was thinking like a sensory deprivation tank being the thing that like go in, astrally project.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Sounds like a book, Terry.
Yeah. The joke here being I had a 9-page outline that was like 4,000 or 5,000 words, and then I had a supplemental document which just had things scrawled over it that just it's pretty close to being like Heinz ketchup equals Girl Scouts ? Bear Stearns 2007 financial collapse.
I like these colorful binder clips you're using.
Thank you. They each have little faces on it too.
Aww.
So that one's smiling at you, and this one's kind of doing a little bit of smirking. Like,
oh, that's the Yaldabaoth one.
Yep. The other thing to consider is one of the fun things within Gnosticism is we don't know what a lot of the things that are referenced are. They are characters that are named. So like if you want to play with the twice born, the luminaries, the water of the 5 seals, the 5 great rituals, we don't know what they were. So you can't really be wrong. And anytime I can't be wrong, I'm going to love it. There are contemporary practitioners of Gnosticism, and there are communities that have both continued it, as we talked about the Mandeans, as well as reconstructed Gnostic churches that are kind of playing off of these things. If you do want to see how contemporary practitioners are doing that, links will be in the show notes. Or if you have concerns about, if you feel more comfortable playing with quote unquote dead beliefs, know that there is still a bit moving around. But Pook, thank you so much for joining and staring dead-eyed as I just kind of rambled on about
It was
this.
quite an education.
Anything that you would like to promote or let people know about?
In the role-playing context, check out Changeling the podcast. Check out Storyteller's Vault. These are my things that I'd like to point to.
Links will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Just a note that at the completion of the credits, I have a recording of Pook reading The Thunder Perfect Mind, which They did in one take pretty spectacularly. I strongly recommend you stick around for it. This has been Mage the Podcast, where the only illusion is that you're not in the studio with us. The show is brought to you by our executive producers, who you can join at patreon.com/magethepodcast. First, we have the oracles of the following things I mispronounced. Ben Bendlow, Oracle of Pook, saying Valentinius instead of Valentinus. Buck Gregory, Oracle of me then saying Valentinius instead of Valentinus. Christopher Phillips, Oracle of calling the book Validus instead of Valis. Guy Stewart, Oracle of me saying Mandeanism instead of Mandeism. Jay Widener, Oracle of me mispronouncing Harmaziel. Josh Hillerup, Oracle of me mispronouncing Oriel. Mikhail, Oracle of me mispronouncing Devethai. Pugaji, Oracle of me mispronouncing Elileth. Sean Gallagher, Oracle of me accidentally swapping John and Paul in a segment I ultimately cut because of how embarrassed I was. The crew of Erebus, Oracle of me saying the gospel and truth instead of the secret gospel ones. St. UX Player, Oracle of me saying Jesus is an important figure in Christianity, which is true, but is such an understatement I'm going to call it wrong. Jason Vines, Oracle of me mispronouncing Tikkun Olum, which I ultimately cut, and I probably also mispronounced it there. And Derek Semsick, Oracle of me probably saying Renaissance because I just say the word that way. It's the one weird thing I say Britishly. Along with Archmaster Andrew Edelstein, Archmaster Brad the Blue, Archmaster Dan Svensson, Archmaster Leroy Bryce, Archmaster Michael Parker, Archmaster Morgan Aran, Archmaster Nathan Weaver, Alex, Alexia, Ambiversion, Anders S., Anon, Badurfi, Berto, Blaze Hibbert, Blake Ryan, Brandon Bryce Perry, Bubba the Pale One, Chris Blake, Sin Shodis, Daniel Cuppen, Daniel Scribner, Darren Hennessy, David Roy, Dennis Osborne, Eli Levenger, Eric Schwenk, Fragarok, George Laura, Gray Trillig H, Henry Kraft, Hugo the Bog Person, Eabol, Jason Duncan, Jason Kennedy, Jason W. Briggs, Jay Gatsby, Jeff Bryn, Jen, Jervis Johnson, John Magnuson, Joel Andes, Laws and Stuff, Kathleen Halperin, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Chris Kinner, Leslie Weatherstone, Manel Canos, Matthew Prohl, Maurice Hopkins, Michael Creedle, Nibero, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klamanoff, Patrick McNamara, Patrick Mulder, Pax Cow, Rachel Grace, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Robart the Robot, Ryan Stray, Rob H., Ryan Kendi, Samuel Tobin, Sployd, Sev Nessus, Starfish, Stephen Carton, Steve Wynyard, Thrice Great, Tyler Bryan, Vincent Hamilton, Walter, William Conley, William Martin, and Wolf Larryson. Our EP shoutout in this episode is to Steve Wynyard, who I assume is the same Steve Wynyard who's a committee member of the International Lawn Tennis Association out of Oxfordshire, United Kingdom. The Lawn Tennis Association is the governing body for tennis in Great Britain. It oversees the sport's development from grassroots to professional levels. I tried to find some fun facts about the organization and lawn tennis in general and couldn't really, so I made up some fake records. Most recorded kills, Slade the Smasher Thompson. 57 confirmed on-court takedowns, notorious for his death serve. Longest touchdown, Rex the Rocket Henderson, 120-yard serve and sprint, breaking through 3 courts in a single game. Fastest game completion, Blaze Blitzkrieg Armstrong, won a match in 3.5 minutes using his Blitzkrieg Blitz strategy. Most explosive rallies, Titania the Tornado McAllister created 17 on-court tornadoes with her rapid spin serves. Longest rally, Viper Venom Valdez versus Roger Reaper Robinson, a 72-hour nonstop volley ending in a time when both players passed out simultaneously. Highest serve speed, Thor Thunder Thorson served a speed of 300 miles per hour, leaving a trail of fire across the court. Most intimidating stare down, Grim the Gaze Garcia. Opponents forfeited match after a 10-minute stare down, citing psychological trauma. Next time I think of lawn tennis, I'll think of you, Steve. Rather listen on YouTube, search Mage the Podcast on YouTube to find our full library there. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on the site formerly known as Twitter. We have a hop in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. Mage the Podcast is also on Mastodon at dice.camp @magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye.
Well, just as context, I want to explain what this is.
Okay.
So this is The Thunder Perfect Mind, which is a poem that was found amid the texts of the Nag Hammadi library in the 40s. I don't know when this specific poem was uncovered, but it's been pointed to and used as inspiration by a wide variety of authors and artists. But it's kind of notable for, it has this structure where it's kind of, to go back to that concept of dualism, it's in the first person voice, and it's just essentially an enumeration in this very sort of mystic way of contradictions or dualities. One of the things that I've heard said about it is it's meant to be in the voice of Sophia, which I always thought was kind of interesting, but it's completely unlike most of the other texts in that corpus, because so many of them are like gospels or pseudo gospels or whatever, and this is just like a poem. So It's very long. I think it's very beautiful. This is the George W. McRae translation. Here goes. The Thunder Perfect Mind. I was sent forth from the power, and I have come to those who reflect upon me, and I have been found among those who seek after me. Look upon me, you who reflect upon me, and you hearers hear me. You who are waiting for me, take me to yourselves, and do not banish me from your sight. And do not make your voice hate me, nor your hearing. Do not be ignorant of me anywhere or any time. Be on your guard, do not be ignorant of me. For I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am the members of my mother. I am the barren one, and many are her sons. I am she whose wedding is great, and I have not taken a husband. I am the midwife, and she who does not bear. I am the solace of my labor pains. I am the bride and the bridegroom, and it is my husband who begot me. I am the mother of my father, and the sister of my husband, and he is my offspring. I am the slave of him who prepared me. I am the ruler of my offspring, but he is the one who begot me before the time on a birthday, and he is my offspring in due time, and my power is from him. I am the staff of his power in his youth, and he is the rod of my old age, and whatever he wills happens to me. I am the silence that is incomprehensible, and the idea whose remembrance is frequent. I am the voice whose sound is manifold, and the word whose appearance is multiple. I am the utterance of my name. Why, you who hate me, do you love me, and hate those who love me? You who deny me, confess me, and you who confess me, deny me. You who tell the truth about me, lie about me, and you who have lied about me, tell the truth about me. You who know me, be ignorant of me, and those who have not known me, let them know me. For I am knowledge and ignorance, I am shame and boldness, I am shameless, I am ashamed. I am strength and I am fear, I am war and peace, give heed to me. I am the one who is disgraced and the great one, give heed to my poverty and my wealth. Do not be arrogant to me when I am cast out upon the earth, and you will find me in those that are to come. And do not look upon me on the dung heap, nor go and leave me cast out, and you will find me in the kingdoms. And do not look upon me when I am cast out among those who are disgraced, and in the least places, nor laugh at me. And do not cast me out among those who are slain in violence. But I am compassionate, and I am cruel. Be on your guard. Do not hate my obedience, and do not love my self-control. In my weakness do not forsake me, and do not be afraid of my power. For why do you despise my fear and curse my pride? But I am she who exists in all fears, and strength and trembling. I am she who is weak, and I am well in a pleasant place. I am senseless, and I am wise. Why have you hated me in your counsels? For I shall be silent among those who are silent, and I shall appear and speak. Why then have you hated me, you Greeks? Because I am a barbarian among the barbarians? For I am the wisdom of the Greeks, and the knowledge of the barbarians. I am the judgment of the Greeks and of the barbarians. I am the one whose image is great in Egypt, and the one who has no image among the barbarians. I am the one who has been hated everywhere, and who has been loved everywhere. I am the one whom they call life, and you have called death. I am the one whom they call law, and you have called lawlessness. I am the one whom you have pursued, and I am the one whom you have seized. I am the one whom you have scattered, and you have gathered me together. I am the one before whom you have been ashamed, and you have been shameless to me. I am she who does not keep festival, and I am she whose festivals are many. I am godless, and I am the one whose God is great. I am the one whom you have reflected upon, and you have scorned me. I am unlearned, and they learn from me. I am the one that you have despised, and you reflect upon me. I am the one whom you have hidden from, and you appear to me. But whenever you hide yourselves, I myself will appear. For whenever you appear, I myself will hide from you. Take me understanding from grief, and take me to yourselves from understanding and grief, and take me to yourselves from places that are ugly and in ruin, and rob from those which are good, even though in ugliness. Out of shame take me to yourselves shamelessly, and out of shamelessness and shame upbraid my members in yourselves. And come forward to me, you who know me, and you who know my members, and establish the great ones among the small first creatures. Come forward to childhood, and do not despise it because it is small and little, and do not turn away greatnesses in some parts from the smallnesses, for the smallnesses are known from the greatnesses. Why do you curse me and honor me? You have wounded and you have had mercy. Do not separate me from the first ones whom you have known, and do not cast anyone out, nor turn anyone away. I know the first ones, and those after them know me. I am the knowledge of my inquiry, and the finding of those who seek after me, and the command of those who ask of me, and the power of the powers, and my knowledge of the angels who have been sent at my word, and of gods and their seasons by my counsel, and of spirits of every man who exists with me, and of women who dwell within me. I am the one who is honored and who is praised and who is despised scornfully. I am peace, and war has come because of me, and I am an alien and a citizen. I am the substance and the one who has no substance. Those who are without association with me are ignorant of me, and those who are in my substance are the ones who know me. Those who are close to me have been ignorant of me, and those who are far away from me are the ones who have known me. On the day when I am close to you, you are far away from me, and on the day when I am far away from you, I am close to you. I am within. I am of the natures. I am of the creation of the spirits and the request of the souls. I am control and the uncontrollable. I am the union and the dissolution. I am the abiding, and I am the dissolution. I am the one below, and they come up to me. I am the judgment and the acquittal. I am sinless, and the root of sin derives from me. I am lust in appearance, and interior self-control exists within me. I am the hearing which is attainable to everyone, and the speech which cannot be grasped. I am a mute who does not speak, and great is my multitude of words. Hear me in gentleness, and learn of me in roughness. I am she who cries out, and I am cast forth upon the face of the earth. I prepare the bread, and my mind within. I am the knowledge of my name. I am the one who cries out, and I listen. I am the one who is called truth and iniquity. You honor me, and you whisper against me. You who are vanquished, judge them who vanquish you, before they give judgment against you, because the judge and partiality exist in you. If you are condemned by this one, who will acquit you? Or if you are acquitted by him, who will be able to detain you? For what is inside of you is what is outside of you, and the one who fashions you on the outside is the one who shaped the inside of you. And what you see outside of you, you see inside of you. It is visible, and it is your garment. Hear me, you hearers, and learn of my words, you who know me. I am the hearing that is attainable to everything. I am the speech that cannot be grasped. I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name. I am the sign of the letter and the designation of the division. And I will not move the name to the one who created me, and I will speak his name. Look then at his words and all the writings which have been completed. Give heed then, you hearers, and you also, the angels, and those who have been sent, and you spirits who have arisen from the dead. For I am the one who alone exists, and I have no one who will judge me. For many are the pleasant forms which exist in numerous sins, and incontinencies, and disgraceful passions, and fleeting pleasures, which men embrace until they become sober and go up to their resting place. And they will find me there, and they will live, and they will not die again. It's a lot.
It doesn't sound 1,700 years old.
It doesn't. And
I imagine part of that is fixed in translation.
Yeah, and there's a couple lacunae that as I read through, I was like, oh, I'm going to skip that because...
Oh, were you doing the skips live?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I mean, you know.
And a link to that will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that reading.
Yeah. It's my favorite Gnostic.